This is the Moonlight Graham Show, a freewheeling conversation with the role players, the underdogs, and guys with flat-out great stories in sports.
Hello and welcome back to the Moonlight Graham Show. And our moonlighter for today, like a lot of moonlighters before him, was born in the great town of Fort Dodge, Iowa. But just like the story of Nick Collison, this moonlighter moved away from Fort Dodge at the age of 6 or 7 years old up to Austin, Minnesota, the Spam capital of the world. And while in Austin, Minnesota, eating his fair share of Spam, this moonlighter turned into quite the athlete. At one point, he even thought about walking on as a nose tackle for the great Lou Holtz's Notre Dame football programs. But instead of pursuing a career on the gridiron, this moonlighter took his talents out west on the golf course to play golf at Stanford University. And while this moonlighter was out at Stanford, there just so happened to be the greatest golfer of maybe all time, or at least this era, on that same team, Tiger Woods. And so our moonlighter for today, his name is Conrad Ray. And Conrad Ray, when he was at Stanford University, was a freshman on the 1994 Stanford Men's Golf National Championship team that featured the great Tiger Woods, Casey Martin, and Nota Begay, all on the same college golf team, probably the most famous college golf team of all time, and Conrad Ray was on that team. So after Conrad was a part of that national championship team his freshman year, he ended up playing college golf at Stanford for 4 years before playing for a long time on a bunch of different pro golf tours throughout the world. During his golfing career, he had 12 top 10 finishes on various different professional tours across the world. He played on the nationwide tour. He actually played in the 2005 U.S. Open at Pinehurst as well. But right around that same time, he went from being a golfer to a golf coach. And that's where Conrad has really made his name in the golf world, because today he is the head golf coach out at Stanford University, one of the best college golf jobs there is. And he is about to embark on his 18th season as the head men's golf coach out at Stanford. He has led them to 13 NCAA tournaments, 2 national championships. He's coached 27 All-Americans, 4 Pac-12 Players of the Year, and become one of the most respected golf coaches in the entire country. So it was a real pleasure to get Conrad Ray on the podcast as a guy that was born in Fort Dodge, Iowa, spent some of his childhood there, still has a lot of fond memories of Fort Dodge. It was fun to get him on the podcast, not only to talk about his career and his path, but also, rubbing shoulders with some of the greatest golfers ever. I mean, can you imagine walking on or heading to college and all of a sudden on your team is, Ken Griffey Jr. or Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods? There's really great athletes, and then there's the best of the best. There's the greatest of all time. And it would just be a whole different experience seeing the game, competing with that type of athlete on your team and that type of athlete at practice every day. And so I'm always curious about those that have had that peek behind the curtain, like Conrad had at 4 years at Stanford, getting to know Tiger Woods, playing against Tiger Woods, but also getting to know him as a guy and getting to know him as a friend. And that's part of what made this episode of the Moonlight Graham Show great. And I think you guys are really, really going to enjoy it. So here he is, Moonlighter Conrad Ray. Conrad, we're just talking about both of us being Fort Dodge, Iowa natives, but you moved away when you were pretty young. When did you leave Fort Dodge?
Yeah, so I was I moved when I was, I guess, 6 or 7 years old. My dad was working for Hormel Foods. Ultimately had a 40-plus year career with Hormel, and he was transferred back to Austin, Minnesota, which was their corporate office location. I say that we were there quite a lot after that. My grandparents, Ivan and Cleone Ray, lived in Fort Dodge forever, and Grandpa Ivan worked for Old Home Bread, and Cleone was kind of a stable, kind of an institution, if you will. She only weighed about 100 pounds. I don't know what happened to her grandson, but she was a regular waitress and staff person at the Elks Club in Fort Dodge, and worked on the wait staff there forever and knew a lot of people. So ultimately we traveled back quite a lot to Fort Dodge as a kid growing up, and have spent a lot of really fond memories there in town, playing golf, experiencing different facets of Fort Dodge. So it's a fond place in the memory banks for sure.
How does the Fort Dodge Country Club, which is an underrated Iowa course, how does that course rank for you?
Well, it's I still have flashbacks of trying to hit it in the 18th fairway somehow, one of the most narrow holes in golf. And then also weirdly, I have this recollection of as a young high school golfer playing in the Fort Dodge Open and getting paired with Sean McCarty, and who was a standout at Iowa and was known for his legendary drives. And I just remember me trying to hit an iron off the tee or a 3-wood and get it down into the fairway, but then watching Sean tee it up and basically hit it over the water tower onto the green, cutting the dog leg. And so, now that I'm in college golf, I think back on that moment and think, wow, that was pretty inspirational at the time. He was carrying the Iowa bag, and he had won a bunch of things in the state of Iowa and on the amateur circuits in the summers. So, maybe that was one of the sparks that led me to where I'm at today.
Yeah, you brought up the water tower. I hit the water tower earlier this year.
Yeah. I think you and about half the people that play there. So, it is a cool place. Fort Dodge Country Club is a great layout, and I enjoyed that for a couple summers. I kind of played that Iowa amateur circuit when I was living in Minnesota. Even I'd go down and see my grandparents. I had another set of grandparents that lived in Storm Lake, and so I could hit the Storm Lake, the Storm Lake Amateur and the Fort Dodge Amateur, and a few of those stops along the way. So, a lot of good golf back there.
So when I was looking you up, I'm realizing you moved to Austin, Minnesota, which is famous for Hormel and Spam and all of that. Everybody in the Midwest kind of knows that one. And I'm expecting you to be the best golfer ever from Austin, Minnesota. But then I come to find out Lee Jansen, Tom Lehman, major winners are from Austin, or at least they were born in Austin, Minnesota.
Yeah.
But, it's kind of a famous golf town.
Yeah, I'm not even close to the best golfer coming out of Austin. You list the two great ones. They have similar stories to kind of my connection to Fort Dodge. They both moved away at young ages, but they're from Austin, Minnesota. Another guy, John Chafee, played the PGA Tour for a long time, was a standout at the University of Texas, which was a big deal back then. Midwestern guy going down there and playing well. The other the kind of sports figure that's from Austin, John Madden, was born in Austin, Minnesota. So I don't know if there's something in the water there. Maybe eat enough Spam, it gives you some mystical powers or something. But it's a great sports town, and it was a really fun place to grow up because I could play a bunch of different sports. You didn't really have to specialize. Great schools, a nice little golf course in town as well, and you didn't want to suffer through, as a southern Minnesota winter very often, but you somehow figured it out.
Yeah, Minnesota, it's winter 5 months out of the year up there. And you're playing a sport where most of the talent's coming from places where you can play year round. I was a baseball guy, and the same kind of holds true for baseball. You can do a lot indoors with baseball, but golf, you can't put a golf course inside. There's only so much you can do on the TrackMans and the indoor ranges, but that technology probably wasn't around when you were coming up in Austin. So how did you get enough recruiting buzz to end up at a great place like Stanford?
Well, for me, it was Stanford kind of turned into a dream. I think I was kind of weirdly lucky. I get that question a lot in the seat that I sit in now of how do you manage junior golfers coming up, and how much should they play, and should they have seasons, and, should they play it full time? Should they specialize? That type of thing. And I think I really fall back on, and I look at one of our former players who's now on the PGA Tour, Maverick McNeely, who grew up playing a bunch of different sports here in the Bay Area too. And he put the clubs away just like I did in the winters and play hockey and do different things. And I think it's good for juniors to do that. I think that your body needs to develop. You can do other things to help figure out how to be better, hand-eye coordination, that type of thing. I think there's something to be said for learning how to play on a team. So if you're always doing individual sports and then having the experience of playing on team sports, I think that's a healthy thing in young athlete development. For me, I just love the game. I think sometimes too, I see at my level where kids arrive at the college level and they've played so much golf that they've kind of lost the love of the game. And when people ask me like what the biggest, kind of call sign for success, I would say when you play high level Power 5 golf and getting to the PGA Tour, weirdly, my answer is the love of the game. Like, you have to just want to come out every day and try and get a little bit better and play this sport, good, bad, or ugly, and still love it as much when you're duck hooking it as when you're hitting at 300 in the fairway, and that's maybe a little hard to comprehend, but it's really true. And I don't know. I think growing up in a place like Austin and Fort Dodge, I mean, it gives you that ability to kind of separate out, doing other things, still being an athlete, touching a lot of other things, and you can develop that own passion that you find. It's there's some catch up though, right? Like I remember coming in my freshman year and being the only Stanford freshman on the team here and being from the Midwest. And if I played well, I maybe broke 75 at Stanford. I'm joining a team of All-Americans, and Notre Dame is going out and shooting 68 on a regular, and I'm like, holy mackerel, what am I doing? But you catch up and golf, that's what's the beauty of the sport too, is that you really never know when you're going to kind of figure it out or when you're curved. As long as you're just getting a little bit better every year, I think that's the key to success.
So how did you end up at Stanford though? Like, did you have to call Stanford?
Yeah, it's funny. My dream was to play college football for Lou Holtz at Notre Dame. And
you went both.
Yeah. I mean, you grow up as a Catholic kid in the Midwest, upper Midwest, and they were at the top. And, Coach Holtz was an inspiring guy. I loved what he had to say. I just studied everything he talked about and preached and everything like that. And so I was dead set on doing that. And so I went down the road of college football recruiting. I played high school football at pretty high level. We played in the Big Nine Conference in Austin, and I was All-State a couple of years. I played center, nose guard, played both ways. And golf was just something I did in the summer with my friends, and we kicked it around. And it was a way to kind of. Luckily, my dad wasn't too tough on me to have a full-time job in the summer. I could still have some fun. And so anyway, I went down the road of the college football recruiting path, and I did talk to some coaches at Notre Dame. I kind of realized pretty quickly that I wasn't probably a scholarship guy, but I was just maybe going to walk on. And see, I just was passionate about trying to get there. And I always remember this with a chuckle. The line coach, I finally got the defensive line coach on the phone one day, and he said, Conrad, you're pretty good at your position, and congrats on your success with the team and some of the stuff you've done. I've reviewed your tape, but I have to tell you, you're running one place too long. And so I was like, well, I get what you're saying, coach. Thanks for being honest. And so then that led me to just this place of like, okay, I wanted to go to a good school and play Division I athletics and something. And so I decided on a whim to write some letters out in golf. And I connected with the coach at Stanford, bless his heart, Wally Goodwin, who was a long tenured guy. He's a Hall of Fame coach. And he wrote me back and he said, look, I appreciate your credentials and your note. And, I can tell you're passionate about trying to get better. I've just missed on one of my top recruits in admission. And if you can get into school, you need to take the SAT a couple more times and do a few things. But if you can do that, call me back and I might have a walk-on spot for you. And so my mom claims that she was also working the channels on the back end, like calling Wally on a regular, like buttering him up, trying to convince him to take me. But I don't buy that so much. At least my ego doesn't. So anyway, that's what happened. I ended up getting into school. I remember going in to my guidance counselor in Austin and saying I needed to take the SAT. And he said, well, we don't take the SAT, and why do you want to go to the Ivy League? And I was like, well, wait a minute. First of all, Stanford's not in the Ivy League. Secondly, like, come on, like help a guy out, right? And so I ended up driving to Minneapolis and Rochester to take a couple more versions of the SAT. I got my scores high enough. I ultimately got in, proceeded to walk on my freshman year at Stanford. We won the national championship that year, by the way. I was the only freshman on the team. I was totally in the deep end, but it was a cool story for me. It was kind of like winning the lottery and you didn't even know what ticket you had. So it was pretty cool looking back on all that.
When you're writing that letter to Stanford, do you have any idea, like Tiger Woods, Nota Begay, Casey Martin, like do you know that that's the top team in the country?
Well, I knew their names, right? I was playing some competitive golf, and I should say, like, I played enough high school golf. I finished, I did okay in like the state junior, and I had a decent high school spring career. Went to a little Catholic high school in Austin, Pacelli High School. And so, it was one of those things where I knew of them, but I didn't really know of them. You get out here and all of a sudden, coach says, yeah, we got this great recruit named Eldrick Woods signed up for next year. And then you start looking at his record, and he by the time he had gotten here, he'd already won three U.S. juniors, which nowadays, like, if you win one USGA championship, you're basically writing your ticket anywhere at Division I college golf. And he showed up with 3 under his belt, and then proceeded to win 3 U.S. amateurs while he was here. No one will ever touch that record, I don't think. And so I was really, like I said, I was just kind of awestruck that I was joining this team. But the great thing about it was I was just like total low guy in the totem pole, but I feel like I'm pretty observant. I got to practice with these guys every day and work out and get to know them and see their habits and understand what it takes. And I think that set me on a track of improvement, both in my own game, and it's now helped me as a coach for sure.
Yeah. What was the moment like when you're out on the golf course? Because, I got to imagine you didn't play in front of many galleries in Austin, Minnesota. And then all of a sudden you're the freshman on this national championship team with the most famous amateur golfer since Jack Nicklaus or, Ben Hogan, named one of the greats. And all of a sudden you're playing in front of like real galleries for the first time.
Yeah, it's nerve wracking, right? I mean, I think you learn some stuff about yourself. You learn how to manage your emotions. I think that's really the kind of the 15th club, if you will, said tritely, like, managing yourself in this sport is really half the game at a high level. And it's not that Tiger doesn't get nervous, as an example. He just does better at managing those nerves. I do have a funny story, though, to kind of fast forward. I ended up qualifying for the U.S. Open in 2005. And I always remember this because I walked out on the first tee, and here I am. I played a lot of professional golf, and it was actually my first year coaching. I get in the Open, and I contacted Tiger to say, hey, I'd love to play a practice round with you. I knew he was in full prep mode. And so he said, okay, don't be late. I'm teeing off Monday morning at 6 a.m. So this is at Pinehurst, number 2. And I show up, and I am nervous. I can't even talk. I'm so nervous because I know this is going to be a big day. And he shows up and hits like 3 balls. He's totally chill. He looked like he'd already shot a commercial. He looked like $1 million. Like, his Nike outfit was solid. He's ready to go. Here I am, like, shirts untucked, my visor's crooked. I'm sweating bullets, And we walk out on the tee, and he could see that I was about to pass out. And he grabbed me by the shirt collar, essentially, and said, listen, with a few explicatives added, I'll keep those out. But he's like, listen, dude, you see all these people up here? They're here to watch me. They don't know who the hell you are. So there's no reason to be nervous, And I was like, and he said it loud enough so people could hear it. And it really broke the ice. And I'm indebted for him for that, because I might have, like, literally passed out on the first tee on Monday of the U.S. Open. So, that all goes back to the point of just being able to manage your emotions, and you work through things. If it doesn't kill you, it's going to make you better, I guess. So
this year I caddied in the local qualifier, and then I caddied in the final qualifier. We almost made the U.S. Open, the guy I was carrying the bag for. So when you qualified in 2005, you probably got to skip the local, but where did you qualify from for the U.S. Open?
Well, I got lucky. I actually made it through. I had to do local. Then the sectional was just down the road here at a great course called Cordoval Golf Club in San Jose. And I'd played there a fair amount. And it's great. It's a great course. I shot, I think, even or 1 under par for 36 holes. And I was an alternate. And usually I've done the Open qualifying for years, and I'd gotten to the sectional a number of times, just never gotten in, and didn't have enough status to get in, obviously, off that. So I was just kind of like, oh, okay, odds of playing are low. I go back to work, no sort of prep in mind. And about a week later, I get a call from Tom Davis at the USGA, and he said, hey, Conrad, I want to let you know that we've had a withdrawal. Aaron Clark, who sadly at the time was battling, his wife had cancer and was sick, and he was withdrawing from the championship. So you've earned I guess the way that they do it is they kind of just pull a site out as the first assignment as far as alternates go. And I got in as an alternate. So I show up, here I am 5 days away from the Monday of the U.S. Open, and I'm at my, at home just heading to work, and I'm talking to the USGA about it. I lost my mind. I'm like, oh my God, I got to go play in the Open. I haven't practiced. I'm worried about the team. And so somehow I made it back there in 3 or 4 days and made arrangements and had a great experience. I'm trying not to think about the scores I shot, but, newfound appreciation for that highest pinnacle of golf in the U.S. Open and how tough it is.
What was more nerve-wracking, playing in the U.S. Open or playing a practice round with Tiger on Monday?
I think it was the practice round, actually.
Really?
That first little bit, I was like, because I didn't know what to expect, and I knew that the crowds were going to be overwhelming, and that's something that I think doesn't get talked enough about Tiger's record when you look at the number of wins he's had and what he's had to deal with, exponentially or additionally above what other great players have had to deal with. His galleries don't even compare, and so that's something that's real for sure. But he, that's why he's great. But he builds off that too. The bigger the crowd, the better he plays, it seems like, right? So, I was awful nervous that first Monday of the U.S. Open for sure.
So I guess I got to ask, have you ever beat Tiger?
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I'll claim a couple rounds on campus where you'd make every single putt and he hits it like crap and, it doesn't really care. But I think that's the thing about his time here is that, you saw him in his glory, but you also saw him, he misses shots, and he does, all these guys do. That's the misnomer sometimes about watching golf on the PGA Tour too, for young college players coming out of the collegiate game, is that you think Rory McIlroy or, Dustin Johnson doesn't hit bad shots. That's wrong. Like, these guys hit it all over the lot sometimes, but they just manage their bad days a little bit better. They manage their emotions. It's not really so much about how you hit it as much as people think.
So you talked about managing your emotions a lot. How much of your job as a coach at Stanford is emotions, mental side of the game? Like, what percentage of, we're working on guys' skills, we're working on their swings, as opposed to emotions, mental, that type of stuff?
Yeah, I think it's a lot, and it's becoming more and more, because what's happening now is the young rising junior golfer that ultimately is going to play at a high level in the Power Five. They've already probably got some people in their mix, like a swing coach, a parent that's involved, a team of people, a workout person, so all of that stuff is baked out way more than it was, say, 15 years ago when a kid arrives on campus. And so where we gain margin, I feel like, is all the stuff in between. Are you practicing well? Are you sleeping the right way? Is your equipment fit well? What's your mental game like? How are you managing your team? And we try and give them those skills, to kind of carry on. Cause I think that's where it's really like, if you watched, our team warm up on the range as an example, you'd watch all their balls fly and their swings, and they all look pretty good. Right. Then there's clearly first team All-Americans in that bunch. And there's 10th guy on the teams, and those, there's guys that can't break 75. So the technical elements of golf, I think, become tighter. They're important, but they become just one piece of the performance pie that we try and pursue here.
How often do you get to work on your game? Like, you're a coach and you got to manage this whole thing, but you also, golf's one of these sports you can play forever. Unlike baseball or football or basketball, once you retire as a player, you kind of retire as a player, and then you move on to be a coach. Whereas golf, like, I'm guessing you want to swing the sticks around every now and again too.
Yeah, and I'm scarily kind of approaching 50, right? So like
big question.
I feel like, I play enough to not be embarrassed. Let's put it that way. I have 3 young daughters at home who I love tracking on the weekends with their sports, and I'm on the road so much with recruiting and team travel too, that I want to be a good dad too. So my free time is limited, but I love to play, and I've turned into kind of that like greasy old guy we joke about, like you miss a bunch of greens, but you get up and down and you can putt a little bit and talk a bunch of crap too. Yep. It's kind of funny how I can get paired up with some of our young guys and just say a couple things, and they just are, pumping it in the trees, and I'm like, guys, like, if I can rattle you, like wait till you get out on tour and play with that crusty veteran. I mean, he'll do the same thing. So there's a little gamesmanship involved for sure too.
Is there going to be a run at the senior tour at 50?
No, I don't know. I don't think so. I think I would love to think that I could play a little bit more and maybe get involved. I'm kind of in this limbo of I got my amateur status back, and that allows me to play with some of our donors and some different events and different things. And so I don't know, maybe the mid-am is more my style, but the mid-am, it's funny, the USGA has, I think, purposely kind of set the dates. So a bunch of the college coaches, like my peers, like you say, have like transitioned out of a pro career. They don't want those guys sniffing around. They want that mid-amateur to be pure, the kind of the working stiffs in America, which I don't blame them. I mean, I have no excuse not to play a lot of golf, but I actually don't play as much as I'd like, probably.
So we're big Kevin Costner guys here on the Moonlight Graham show, because obviously Moonlight Graham, Field of Dreams. And when I watch baseball movies, I'm always critiquing the baseball in the movie, right? And that's what makes Costner's movie so good. Like, he's a believable Crash Davis, switch hitting catcher. He's a believable Billy Chappell pitcher. He looks like, in Field of Dreams, he throws the ball well. Tin Cup is a golf movie, right? And so there's not as many golf movies as baseball movies, but what's your critique of Kevin Costner's swing in Tin Cup?
Oh, I think it's solid. I've actually met Kevin Costner kind of in the golf element. He used to come every year and play with Tiger in the AT&T Pebble Beach tournament. And, he's not a bad golfer. I think that the one thing that he did smartly in that movie, or the producers did, was they recruited a bunch of guys at the time that are on the tour. So Peter Jacobson and Mark Lyon, a few guys were involved. And so I think that helped add credibility to the movie itself. And much like Field of Dreams, this is a random one, but Wally Goodwin, he just passed away within the last year or so, and a wonderful guy, but he kind of retired in the winters down in a place called Tubac, Arizona. And little known, movie kind of trivia, but Tin Cup was filmed in Tubac. So you literally pull into the lot of this resort where they were at, and you can see the armadillo walking down the street, and you kind of throw them back into the movie set almost, So if anyone wants to get off the beaten path and tie in a little golf, Tubac's a good spot.
So Costner could play.
Costner can play. That you write off Caddyshack is kind of the comedy. Like Caddyshack's if you're a golfer, that's the movie. But I give thumbs up to Tin Cup, just like, as you say, just the golf is decent, and the scenarios that they paint are decent. That's why, like, I can kind of tell if there's a golfer involved when they tell me they like Happy Gilmore. I'm not a Happy Gilmore guy.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. So the way we end every episode of the Moonlight Graham Show, Conrad, is with the 5 big questions. All right. So first question is, who's your all-time favorite teammate?
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a really good one. I've had some great teammates. I would have to say, the obvious one. I think I have to go with Tiger. I think that we developed a good relationship, friendly relationship here. I think anytime you can go practice or go to your work every day and be awed by someone, like physically, like that to me is why I put him in that category of like great, right? Like he does and did things that no one else had ever done. So to be able to be around that guy, I say that, and then I've got guys like, so Tiger's in that bucket, but then I've got a guy like Tyler Dennis, who is one of the top executives at the PGA Tour, but this guy came to Stanford as a walk-on. He got his electrical engineering degree in 3 years from Stanford. He was the youngest hire ever at the PGA Tour. He got 100% on his rules quiz, like right out, just one of these guys that was just like amazing performer in his own right. So I've had a lot of great guys that I've been able to coach and be teammates with. And so it's hard to pick out just one. And I think that's what makes our place at Stanford special too. It draws people from all over the world that have a really cool story to tell.
What's one moment, whether it was from your playing career or your coaching career, that you look back on, when you close your eyes at night and it just reminds you of everything that you love about the game of golf?
Yeah, I think that probably the one that right now comes to mind is there was a scenario in 2019 when we won the national championship at the Blessings in Arkansas. I'm walking the final round with a young man named Daulet Tulabayev, who is from Almaty, Kazakhstan, of all places.
Wow.
And if we have the time, I'll give you the quick story on Daulet. So I'm in my office, rewind another 3 or 4 years prior to that. I'm in my office on a rainy winter day up at the golf course here at Stanford, and knock on the door, and it's Daulet and his mom in from Kazakhstan making a West Coast tour. Daulet speaks a little English. Mom speaks no English. He had just gotten in and spent a month he's very, very smart kid. And he was at Phillips Exeter, which is the number one high school in America, essentially.
Better than St. Edmund in Fort Dodge?
Yeah, I know. Better than Pacelli High School. What a different world, right? But anyway, to tell you the quick story, so he says, hey, I really love golf. I'm doing pretty well. I played a little bit in Kazakhstan, and I want to get on a track to get to Stanford someday. And he's saying all this kind of in broken English. I sat with him for about a half hour. I said, well, take this right away. You might have to not go to Phillips Exeter to do that because I know and respect how academic it is. So unbeknownst to me, and the other part of that is, okay, where do we go for coaching? I said, well, there's a lot of top coaches. The number one coach probably right now at the time is Butch Harmon, teaches a bunch of PGA Tour pros, but he's hard to get a hold of and he doesn't see anyone and, he's expensive. So meeting finishes. I don't think I'll ever see these people again. It's a nice family. But unbeknownst to me, Daulet and his mom get in the car. They drive down the highway. They had researched Maverick McNeely, who previously was an All-American and on the tour and a great player for us. Daulet enrolls in his high school in San Jose that day. They get on the phone, call Butch Harmon, and figure out a way to go start taking lessons from Butch Harmon. So over the course of the next 2 or 3 years, they're in this full prep mode to become a Stanford golfer. Wow. And so it happened. He got into his senior year in high school, started winning tournaments. He was doing really well in class. And we decided to give him a spot, and he got into school. So then fast forward, it's 2019. He's a freshman on the team. He's played a little bit with us throughout the season, probably half the tournaments. We get down to a penultimate moment in the match play portion against Wake Forest. He's 5 up with 5 to play. And I'm walking with him, and it's the key point in the match against Wake Forest in the semifinals of the national championship. So he starts leaking oil. He loses a couple holes. He gets up to 17. He's 2 up with 1 to play. He has some weird ruling, loses the hole. He hits his ball accidentally, so he loses. It's an automatic loss of hole. So he's 1 up with 1 to play, and it's absolutely not going his way. He's in full panic mode. Hits it right down the pipe, though, in the fairway at the Blessings on 18. Hits to this day one of the best 5 irons I've seen in competition, right over the top of the flag, about 25 feet. And this kid, he buries the putt, and I'm getting emotional telling you the story. But just to see where he was 3 or 4 years ago, or prior to making a 25-footer for Stanford to move on in the national championship was something of legend. And the emotion that he had and in our connection, the whole thing was really a special thing for me. So that's my long-winded memory and story of the success here at Stanford. I mean, to this day, he's on our team. He's gonna finish with a master's in computer science from Stanford, and who knows what he's gonna end up doing. But pretty special moment in the history of Stanford golf for me.
What a story, and thanks for sharing that. And I love that he was unraveling too.
Oh,
and he got it all together on 18.
He was losing it, and as a coach, I'd like to think I was walking with him. I was right on his shoulder, and I said, "Dude, you are still 1 up. You can play a great hole here." And to his credit, he was able to gather himself as a young freshman and hit 2 of the greatest shots I've seen under the circumstances, and bury a putt. Really, 3 of the best shots. And so it was really cool. That's the thing I think we all love about golf is that the minute you think it's the worst sport ever, you do something cool, right, and it keeps you coming back for more.
Well, what's the flip side of that story? The story that keeps you up at night for the worst reasons, the missed putt, the big loss, what's that one?
Yeah. It's funny because I've been at this kind of where I'm at now. I'm in year, I guess I started in 2004. And so what's that, year 17, about to start year 18. I'm at that stage now where a lot of the kids that I recruited over the years are now going out on the PGA Tour and winning big. So I would say the one thing that's kind of simmered up over the last like 6 months, I've realized is that the amount of like recruiting misses I've made, in my time, like Colin Morikawa was keen on Stanford. Patrick Cantlay was keen on Stanford. I just saw Scotty Scheffler, who had a huge win against John Rahm in the Ryder Cup. Scotty was down at this tournament we were at, and we were able to win in Texas last week. And he came up to me. He's like, yeah, coach, I really wanted to come to Stanford. I'm like, Scotty, do you know how hard that is for me to hear? So you can't get them all, but I think that's probably what keeps me up at night is like, what could have been kind of stories of these guys that turned out to be amazing college golfers and professionals.
Who was your role model growing up?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. You're giving me some big ones. I would say, I really looked up to my dad. My dad's he's a super hard worker and has been his whole life. And I think, out of all of this stuff and success and traveling and doing whatever you're doing in life, I think there's really no getting around the need for working hard and just showing up every day even when it sucks or, it's hard or you got a lot on your plate, so that's the lesson that he taught me. I think about that a lot too, because I think nowadays it's all about, trying to do right by your kids, but I'm trying to think to myself, okay, I've got 3 young daughters. I'm like, okay, well, how do I make, be an example for them? And what do I do to do that? And I just keep falling back on just like the importance to me of work ethic. And I think you find that, that's in the water in Fort Dodge, Iowa, right? And in Austin, Minnesota, you got to work hard to be successful. And so that's probably how I'd answer that one. My dad's probably the guy that I looked up to the most.
I love that. And final question here, I've been caddying. I'm trying to get to the U.S. Open with my guy as a caddy. What's your advice for me carrying the bag? I'm not a golf guy, right? My golf game's terrible, but I'm pretty good on the bag, right? I'm pretty good at the bag. So what are the do's and don'ts of a good caddy?
Well, I think the 3 ups are important. Do you know what the 3 ups are?
No, like I said.
So you need to show up, you need to keep up, and you need to shut up. Like those are the 3. So that's probably right out of the gate what I tell you. No, I think being a good caddy sometimes, and it's funny because I had this almost exact conversation with a former assistant coach who now has left coaching to go out and caddy on the PGA Tour for Brandon Wu, one of our young guys out there, and he's really trying to do right by Brandon and figure out like what Brandon needs and how a caddy can best serve him and that type of thing. And I think what he's realizing it's as much sports psychologist and like reading the room and reading the vibe as it is like giving the technical numbers and like knowing everything about the course or the club to hit. And so I think that's hard for him because he's wired to kind of make sure you have the exact number and know exactly what the greens are doing and the slope and the gradient, all the stuff, the technical pieces of playing high level golf. But I think he's having to push himself. So I would just say a great caddy is as much a friend and a mentor and someone to talk to as it is someone carrying the bag or pulling the club.
I was a little intimidated by Rafa Cabrera Bello's caddy. Like that guy was so good looking and like muscular. And I knew I needed to step my game up when I saw that guy on the range. I'm a work in progress.
My first experience with Steve Williams and Tiger's guy was the exact same. Like this guy should have been they could have called him security guard as quickly as they called him caddy, right? Because he was big and jacked and very serious and didn't take much shit from anyone. Excuse my French, but he's a tough guy.
Cool. Well, Conrad, thank you so much. I really appreciate you spending some time here on the Moonlight Graham Show. Great to talk with a former Fort Dodge guy like yourself. And best of luck this season, entering your 18th year out of Stanford.
Yeah, thanks a million. I'm looking forward to listening to your show. Thanks for having me on today.
Thank you for listening to today's episode with Conrad Ray. But let's get down to business with the Cosner Quest. And you guys heard it on that episode with Conrad Ray. Conrad has played golf with Kevin Cosner. And Roy McAvoy, the Tin Cup golfer, he was for real. Cosner could golf. Not surprised at all because Cosner, he was a great baseball player in all the baseball movies. His swing looked pretty good as a golf swing out there in Tin Cup. So I'm not surprised that Conrad Ray, one of the most prestigious golf coaches in the land, said that Cosner had a pretty good swing. So maybe we're getting a little bit closer to Cosner, being that, heck, Conrad Ray is basically a golf buddy of his. So maybe that was a step in the right direction. The other side of it is, all of the work I'm doing behind the scenes outside of the Conrad Ray discussion here to get us close to Cosner, that basically fell flat on its face this week. A lot of phone calls, a lot of emails, a lot of text messages and DMs that led to almost nothing. Almost zero progress on the Cosner quest outside of that little snippet you did hear from Conrad Ray in today's episode. But not getting discouraged, guys. Not getting discouraged at all, because ultimately this season is going to end with Cosner on the pod. I think we all know that. So I was doing a deep dive into Cosner's IMDb this week, looking at the movies I've seen, some of my favorite Cosner movies, and ones that I hadn't seen. And I went back to the very, very beginning, 1981, which was Cosner's very first movie that he appeared in. And in 1981, I think this movie was filmed in 81, but actually not released until 85. And the name of the movie was called Malibu Hot Summer. And I'm not totally sure that this wasn't like an adult film. I'm not totally sure of this. I have not seen this movie. But because here is the storyline. So John Logan, which was Kevin Costner's character in the movie, John Logan is a poor little rich boy. He learns to love three nubile LA newcomers that will do anything to be introduced to the sizzling nightlife of the City of Angels. Portraying Malibu beach life by day and the LA nightclub life by night, Sizzle Beach USA, which was the original title of the movie, is a stunning insider's critique on the sex and drugs lifestyle of the West Coast swinger scene in the early 1980s. West Coast swinger scene. Like I said, not totally sure that wasn't an adult movie, but not one that I've seen, not one that I'm going to, stamp my recommendation on. But it's funny how, that was 40 years ago. Oh, how times have changed. I bet we could have got Cosner to do the Moonlight Graham Show 40 years ago when he was doing Malibu Hot Summer. But we got a little bit taller of a task now to bring him into the rightful podcast home of Kevin Costner, the Moonlight Graham Show, and we are not going to give up yet. Special thanks to you guys for listening to the pod. Thank you guys for listening to the pod. And also the Moonlight Graham Show team, the trusted co-host Tommy Griffin, brothers Andy and Neil, the best producer in the biz, Brian Sandvik, and the best podcast artwork guy in the entire universe, Brendan Gargano. And thank you guys for listening. Could not have this show without you. Have a great week, Moonlighters.
It's Moonlight Graham, yeah. It's a pretty good program, broadcasting to the heartland. Sports stories for the everyman. It's Moonlight Graham, yeah. Please follow us on Instagram. You're loving us on Twitter too. You download every pod we do. It's Moonlight Graham.